Okay. One of the figures I wanted to talk about for starters was David Walker.
Oh, yeah. David Walker.
Good old Davey. Dave, I don't know what they call
David.
I'm not sure what they called him, but David Walker.
He was an angry young man.
Yeah, he quite angry. I mean, I suppose rightfully so, but
Sure.
so he was born 20 years after 1776, 20 years after the Declaration of Independence. And he died, he had something called Walker's Appeal, right?
Yeah, that's his most famous writing.
And that was in 1829, so about 30 years before the Civil War, just for context for you folks out there.
Yes. Yeah, Walker's interesting. I think he's born in the South and he moves to Massachusetts. I think he owns a clothing store. And winds up rubbing shoulders with a lot of abolitionists in an African American church, and he really becomes today the word is woke, I guess, over the issue, and so he begins a lot of abolitionist activities, and then he writes this Walker's Appeal, which is a remarkable piece of literature. It's long, but it's also very, very strident, very militant for the time. I mean, it was banned in the South. If you got caught with this in the South, it was punishable by law. So yeah, Walker's Appeal is it's interesting because he actually says that it's interesting for a couple of reasons. One, immediately he says, like, African Americans and slaves should rise up and take their freedom. He encourages and got accused, and I think reasonably so, for encouraging slave revolts. And that's why it was banned in the South, because any freedman, and there were freedmen in the South that would get a hold of this, could be kind of the channel.
And freedman was a name for a free slave.
Free
person.
They never maybe were in slavery. Now, there were very few of those in the South, more of those in the North.
Because in his case, his mother was a free person, and his father was a slave.
Yes.
If one of your parents was
mother, all your status was determined by mother.
Oh, so if your father was free and your mother wasn't, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
I wonder if that was because men could just go around.
Well, it definitely.
Oh, look, I got 70 women pregnant. That's 70 free people.
It definitely perpetuated racial rape. So your status was determined by your mother, so that's why he was a free person.
Is that why it was set up like that?
Yes.
Because men had the potential to go around getting how many?
Yeah, you could hop the fence on the planet.
Can't have too many free people was the idea.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So yeah, Walker is in Boston and publishes this thing, and it's interesting because later on, David Walker is cited by many traditional civil rights leaders, like in the 50s, 1950s.
And Frederick Douglass as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And he's cited as kind of the origin of African Americans being involved in abolitionism. I mean, I think when we're in school, we're kind of taught that abolitionists are white Northerners, leading the cause. But and I think Walker's interesting because he's an African American, and he's saying, no, African Americans need to be involved in this civil rights issue of abolitionism, and advocates that African Americans take a role in that. I mean, I have this one quote that might illuminate how radical this is seen.
Yeah.
I don't know if this sign will pop up on my machine, but the gist of it is this. He says, if you're a slave and you kill a slave owner, I don't see any problem with that. That's just like if somebody, slavery is a system that's going to kill you. So to kill someone who's trying to kill you is not a crime.
That's just natural.
Yeah. It's just the same survival. As, he equated it with thirst. If somebody's denying you water, it's unnatural, and you have a natural desire for liberty. You have a natural desire for water. So what's the problem? So, I mean, people read it as like, holy cow, this is promoting slave revolts. And so it was really a remarkable, and he also, a part of Walker's appeal, he goes after Christianity quite a bit too, that, the hypocrisy of a nation that had a lot of Christians in it, but yet would still treat people in this kind of system. So he goes after the hypocrisy of American Christianity. He also proposes, in later civil rights leaders, some of them actually say, if you want to see this black nationalism, where like we don't really want or need white people involved in our movement of liberation, that African Americans should be solely responsible for this. So
white people stay out of this. Is our fight.
Right, and so because they're when we're kids, we're taught that William Lloyd Garrison is the quintessential. He's a white.
I've never heard of William.
Well, you might not have been paying real super close attention in high school.
Oh, that's a definitely.
I'm sure Mike remembers William Lloyd Garrison. Right?
Do you remember?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Who the hell that is?
So William Lloyd Garrison is a newspaper man in Boston, Massachusetts. He's an abolitionist. So do white people have a role in abolitionism? Well, David Walker is kind of seen by many later civil rights leaders as kind of, you want to see where black nationalism, African Americans themselves liberating themselves without the assistance of white people. Walker is often seen as kind of, that's where it begins.
And when Walker was around, didn't Jefferson, Thomas Jefferson, he put out some kind of letter that was criticized for being derogatory towards
well,
blacks?
Very early in his career, he wrote Notes on the State of Virginia, which you look at it and he speculates all kinds of there's all kinds of racist language.
And that was one of the main things David Walker was critical of Jefferson.
Well, sure, and others. I mean, Walker also is making the argument that white abolitionists, although they're in favor of abolitionism, you could be a racist and still be an abolitionist. You could oppose slavery, but you could also say, but wait a minute, I'm not sure that I want social equality.
That's interesting.
So
you could be an abolitionist. So you don't want slaves, but you don't like you don't want actual.
You could see them
equality.
as inferior.
Huh.
Yeah, and there were abolitionists like that. And so Walker comes along and says, look, you white abolitionists, you need to understand something. We're just as smart as you are, and if given the chance, we don't actually need your help.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people look to David Walker as kind of maybe the beginnings of this black separatism that certainly comes to the forefront with Garvey in the 20s and then Malcolm X and the Black Panthers in the 1960s.
Now, can you talk about the American Colonization Society?
Oh, yeah.
Because my understanding is they set up, Liberia was an American colony in Africa, where they essentially wanted to be able to send freed slaves to Liberia to not be in America.
Exactly. Now think about what that's really saying. I think and from the very get-go, many African Americans hated the colonization societies because here's what they thought of them. Oh, here's white people forming a colonization society. So they want to free us from slavery, but send us away. And Walker hates colonization. That also was a part of Walker's appeal. Don't send us away. In fact, we actually built this country with our sweat and blood as much as any white person. So you don't get to send us away. I mean, some of the very first, Madison, Monroe, they were all leaders in this there were various colonization organizations, but you're right. Predominantly whites, and many African Americans saw it as racist to get rid of them. We don't want slavery, or we don't want to hang around you. So please go back to Africa. There's also I ran across this the other day that John Brown,